What would you do if you saw an adult woman deliberately trip your disabled child in broad daylight, on purpose, without remorse, and right in front of dozens of witnesses? Would you freeze in disbelief? Would you scream, cry, act on impulse? Or would you stand there, heart thundering in your chest, as your child hit the ground with a sickening thud, her blood staining the surface meant to protect her? That's exactly what happened to me one Sunday afternoon that was supposed to be about sunshine, laughter, and healing. It was supposed to be a good day. We were at Pinerest Haven's brand new community playground. $300,000 worth of renovations, special cushioned flooring, inclusive equipment, shaded benches for parents. A fresh start for a new chapter in our lives. I still remember the moment vividly, as if it's branded into my memory. My daughter Wren, only 8, her tiny hands gripping the walker handles with determination, a look of pure joy on her face as she carefully made her way toward the play area. Each step was slow, but proud, triumphant. This was a milestone for her. She had waited weeks to try out this new space, had talked about the swings non-stop, had even rehearsed what she would say to other kids. And then, without warning, Octavia Thackeray, our HOA president, stepped just slightly to the side, her foot extending with surgical precision into Wren's path. Wren's walker jerked, one leg catching, and down she went. Time slowed as I watched her body tilt, her arms flail, and then crumple onto the rubberized surface. Her forehead struck the metal edge of the slide support. There was no scream at first, just the dull, awful sound of her hitting the ground, and then silence, followed by the first drip of blood and her small, confused cry. That sound tore through me. It wasn't just pain, it was betrayal. 3 months earlier, I thought I had found our forever home. After years of saving and sacrificing, Wren and I moved into a beautiful house in Pinerest Haven, a gated community just outside Portland. The streets were quiet, the schools top tier, and most importantly, the house needed minimal adjustments to fit Wren's mobility needs. After losing her mother to cancer when she was just 5, it had been just the two of us. Every decision I made was with her future in mind. Wren has mild cerebral palsy. She's brilliant, gifted in math and puzzles, always solving things meant for kids twice her age. But physically, she's had challenges since birth. She uses a walker most days, sometimes a wheelchair when she's tired. Despite everything, she's the brightest light in any room. Her laughter is medicine. Her perseverance humbles me every day. And though she has more hurdles than most, her spirit is unbreakable. But what I hadn't counted on was the quiet hostility of a place that valued uniformity over humanity. From the moment we arrived, Octavia Thackeray made her stance clear. Blonde bob, clipboard always in hand, smile that never touched her eyes. On the very first day, I was collecting our mail when she approached. "Mr. Thorne," she said, her tone dripping with faux politeness, "I noticed you installed a ramp at your entrance. You do realize that exterior modifications require HOA approval?" I explained, as kindly as possible, that accessibility features for people with disabilities are protected by the Americans with Disabilities Act and don't require HOA approval. She didn't argue, not directly. She just smiled tightly and said, "Well, we'll see about that. Pinerest Haven has a certain ambience we strive to preserve. Not everyone appreciates medical equipment on display." Medical equipment. That's what she called my daughter's walker. That was my introduction to what ambience meant here. A place where wheelchairs were unsightly, where a child like Wren was considered a disruption to the neighborhood's image. That wasn't the end, not by a long shot. Letters followed, about our raised flower beds being non-compliant, despite them being built so Wren could garden from her chair. Whispers behind our backs, her teenage son Palmer snickering when we passed. Comments at HOA meetings about residents exploiting special privileges. I had worked for years in federal law enforcement, analyzing evidence of war crimes. I've seen the worst humanity can do. So handling a small-minded bully in a neighborhood felt manageable, annoying, but survivable. Until the playground incident made it personal. It became something else entirely. The day of the incident, the playground was buzzing with excitement. Pinerest Haven had pulled out all the stops. There was a ribbon cutting, a photographer from the local paper, even catered food laid out on checkered cloth tables. It was supposed to be a celebration. Wren had been counting down the days. She had her little checklist, the swing, the slide, the musical station. Everything was designed with inclusive access in mind. It was a rare win, a space built for kids like her too. As we approached, Wren asked, "Daddy, can I try the swings first?" Her face was lit up, eyes wide with joy. "Of course, sweetheart," I said, helping her slowly maneuver the walkway with her walker. We were halfway across the field when the storm hit us again. Octavia intercepted us, as if waiting. Clipboard in hand, sunglasses perched like a crown of superiority. She didn't even address Wren. Just me. "I'm sorry, but this surface isn't designed for walkers or wheelchairs. It's specialized. Very expensive. We need to protect it." She said it loud enough for every parent within earshot to hear. My blood boiled, but I kept my voice steady. Actually, this playground was designed with ADA compliance. The rubberized surface is ideal for mobility devices. She looked down at Wren's walker like it was a rusted shopping cart. "Well, I'm just concerned about damage, and frankly, the other children might be uncomfortable." I didn't say what I wanted to say. I didn't yell. I just looked her in the eye. "The other children? Or you?" Her face turned crimson. "I'm looking out for everyone's interests, Mr. Thorne. Maybe the city park is better for your daughter. They have accommodations there." I felt Wren's hand tighten in mine. I looked down and saw her eyes dimming. The excitement she'd been carrying all day, flickering out like a candle in the wind. That's when our neighbor, Dr. Sachi Inouye, Wren's pediatrician, stepped in. "Actually, the equipment here is universal design, Octavia. You chaired the committee that approved it. It's meant to include everyone." Octavia said nothing, just clenched her jaw. We walked past her. I wasn't going to let her ruin this day. For the next 20 minutes, Wren flew on the swing, her laughter like wind chimes in spring. She even made friends, kids who asked about her walker, then immediately included her in their games. They didn't care. They just played. "Daddy, can I walk to the slide by myself?" she asked. The slide had a platform designed specifically for children like Wren. "Of course, honey. I'll be right behind you," I said, giving her the space she craved and the support she needed. She started forward, slow, deliberate steps, gripping the walker with practiced care. I stayed close, watching her. She was halfway there when Octavia reappeared. I didn't even see her at first. She moved silently from the edge of the playground, her arms crossed, eyes narrowed. As Wren passed, Octavia took a single step. That was all it took. One subtle, calculated motion. Her foot angled outward, just enough to catch the front leg of the walker. It happened in a flash. Wren's balance tipped, the walker buckled, and my daughter was airborne. Her body crashed into the ground, her face striking the metal corner of the play structure. Time froze. I heard the sound, sharp, hollow, final. Then Wren let out a cry. Not a scream, but a soft, heartbreaking sound of confusion and pain. Blood began to drip from above her eye, staining the rubber surface. Her hands were scraped raw and she lay there trembling. I ran. Everything else disappeared. The parents, the playground, the sun overhead. All I could see was my child on the ground, bleeding, hurt, humiliated. Octavia's voice rang out again, false concern oozing like poison. "Oh my goodness, these walkers are so unstable. This is what I was afraid of. But I knew. I saw it. And someone else did too. Jericho Moss, our community's head of security and a former officer, stood nearby, eyes dark with what he'd witnessed. "Mr. Thorne," he said in a low voice, crouching next to me. "That wasn't an accident." I nodded, the fire rising in me. "I know." I didn't shout. I didn't lunge. I didn't explode. What I felt wasn't fury. It was precision. A cold, focused calm, the kind I'd developed after years of investigating atrocities for the Department of Justice. It was the feeling I got when facts started lining up, when truth emerged from chaos. I stood up straight, keeping my daughter gently cradled in one arm, and turned to face the woman who had just assaulted her. My voice didn't tremble. "Mrs. Thackeray," I said loudly enough for everyone at the playground to hear, "would you care to explain why you deliberately extended your foot into my daughter's path?" The buzz of voices fell to stunned silence. Heads turned. Octavia's face paled for a split second before she pasted on a haughty mask of indignation. "That's a disgusting accusation," she scoffed, her voice dripping with false outrage. "She tripped because those contraptions are unstable. I warned you, didn't I?" But she wasn't talking to me anymore. She was performing, desperately trying to salvage her image. "Jericho," I said, still holding Ren close. "You mentioned you saw what happened." He nodded grimly. "From my position by the fence, I had a clear view. Mrs. Thackeray moved her foot deliberately. It wasn't an accident." His words landed like a thunderclap. Several parents gasped. Others looked at Octavia with shock and disbelief. Even those who had always nodded along with her HOA speeches now took a step back, unsure of what to believe. She sputtered, eyes darting, looking for support. "Are you really going to believe the hired help over the HOA president?" she barked. "I've served this community for 6 years." Her voice cracked as panic crept in. But the tide was already turning. Palmer, her 17-year-old son, had been lounging at the basketball court earlier. Now he walked over slowly, his tall frame tense, his expression haunted. "Mom," he said, his voice cracking, "why would you do that?" There was no response, just silence. Then something incredible happened. From the back of the crowd, a firm voice rang out. "I'd like to see the footage." Councilwoman Zara Quinlan stepped forward, parting the sea of onlookers like a force of nature. I had seen her before at neighborhood meetings, but didn't realize she was a mother too, a mother to a teenager with Down syndrome, as I later found out. She watched the replay with a stillness that made the air feel heavy. When it ended, she lifted her eyes to Octavia. "This appears to be a clear assault on a minor, with the added gravity of disability discrimination," she said, her voice low and razor-sharp. Octavia looked like a balloon slowly losing air. "You're blowing this out of proportion," she stammered. "It was a misunderstanding." I shook my head. Number A misunderstanding doesn't leave a child bleeding from the head. Ren whimpered against my shoulder, and I lowered my voice. "Some people think that children like my daughter are inconvenient. They make excuses. They hide behind rules. But this was intentional." I turned toward the crowd. "We're going to the hospital now, but I promise you this isn't the end of it." That night, while Ren rested at the ER getting stitches for the gash above her eye, I sat beside her and did what I'd been trained to do. I started building a case. The attending physician noted everything in the medical report: the cut, the concussion symptoms, the location and shape of the injuries. Cause: suspected deliberate assault by an adult. That alone was enough to pursue charges, but it wasn't just about justice anymore. It was about protection. Ren deserved better. Our entire community deserved better. While I held her hand and stroked her hair, my phone began to blow up with messages. Neighbors who had witnessed the scene were texting me in outrage. Word had spread fast. The video was already being shared through group chats. Comments of support flooded in. Apologies for staying silent in the past. Admissions that people had noticed Octavia's behavior for years but had been too afraid to speak up. That fear was breaking now. By the time we got home the next evening, something remarkable had happened. There, standing on our porch, was a group of neighbors. Some carried food. Others held cards and flowers. There were tears in their eyes, hands on shoulders, promises of support. It wasn't pity. It was solidarity. Dr. Inoue had organized it all, with the help of Marcus Torres and several other young families. "We want you to know," Marcus said, his voice steady. "She doesn't represent us. What happened was vile, and we're with you." I nodded, deeply moved. And that night, after Ren had fallen asleep clutching her stuffed fox, I made a choice. I wasn't just going to be a father protecting his daughter. I was going to be an advocate, a witness, and if necessary, a one-man legal hurricane. I called into work and took emergency family leave. The next morning, I filed a formal police report and turned over the footage, along with medical documentation. The officer on duty didn't hesitate. "With this evidence," he said, "we'll be pursuing charges for assault on a minor and reckless endangerment." Then I contacted the HOA board's vice president, demanding an emergency session. I included the footage and cited the bylaws Octavia had violated: conduct unbecoming of a board member, discrimination against a protected class, and abuse of power. A civil rights attorney specializing in disability discrimination cases reviewed the situation and agreed to represent us. She was outraged and determined. What I didn't expect came later that afternoon. A knock on the door. Palmer stood there, shoulders hunched, eyes nervous. "Mr. Thorne," he said, barely above a whisper, "I wanted to say sorry, to Ren, and to you." I stepped aside cautiously. He walked in holding a small gift bag. Inside was a hand-drawn card and a plush toy fox. "I heard her talking about foxes at the pool last month," he said. "It's her favorite animal, right?" I nodded. Ren was on the couch, quietly working on a puzzle with her friend. When she saw Palmer, she tensed, but he knelt down and said, "Hi, Ren. I'm really sorry about what happened, about how I acted before too. I was wrong." She looked at him for a long second, then took the fox. "His name's Rusty," she whispered. Palmer smiled, and before he left, he turned to me. "There's something else," he said, hesitating. "My mum. She's been sending emails to board members, about you, about Ren, trying to find ways to force you out. I have copies. I think you should see them." What he showed me was even worse than I'd imagined. Emails filled with phrases like lowering property values, unwanted visibility, exploiting sympathy. She had even plotted to schedule neighborhood events at times she knew Ren couldn't attend. It was a campaign of quiet cruelty, and now we had undeniable proof. The days that followed moved swiftly. The police charged Octavia formally. The HOA board voted to remove her as president and began proceedings to fine her. Windermere Luxury Properties, the firm where she worked as a senior agent, suspended her without pay pending investigation. The entire foundation of her control cracked and then shattered. The following week, the HOA clubhouse was overflowing. It was standing room only for the emergency open meeting. Ren and I walked in together. Parents stood, clearing a path for us. Some patted my shoulder. Others smiled gently at Ren, who wore a glittery headband to cover her stitches. At the podium, the interim HOA president, a retired judge named Howard Fletcher, opened the meeting with a grave expression. "We're here to confront a very serious incident," he began. one that has shaken our sense of who we are as a community. Then, to everyone's surprise, he said, "Mrs. Thackeray has asked to make a statement." A low murmur spread through the crowd as Octavia walked slowly to the microphone. She looked nothing like the woman who used to stalk the neighborhood with a clipboard. She looked tired, diminished. "I want to apologize," she began, her voice fragile. "I've spent the past week reflecting, praying, and I realize my actions were inexcusable. I've submitted my resignation from the board, and my family will be leaving Pinerest Haven within the month." She stepped back, her eyes flicking briefly to me. I saw no remorse, only the hollow stare of someone who finally understood that their power was gone. When the judge invited me to speak, I hadn't planned on it. But as I walked to the front with Ren in my arms, I knew exactly what needed to be said. 3 months ago, I told them, my daughter and I moved here looking for community. What happened at that playground was horrific. But what happened afterward, your support, your actions, your courage, showed us that we found exactly what we were searching for. I paused, looking at each face, letting the silence breathe. Community isn't about matching fences or tidy lawns. It's about showing up for each other. It's about doing the hard things. It's about making sure that every child, not just the easy ones, not just the perfect ones, has a place to belong. Ren tugged my sleeve. "Can I say something?" I lowered the mic. "Thank you for helping me and my daddy," she said softly. "And I really like the new ramp. I can go on the big slide all by myself now." The applause that followed wasn't just loud. It was healing. In the weeks that followed, Pinerest Haven changed. Accessibility upgrades were approved for every shared space. A new inclusivity committee was formed, with Dr. Inoue as chair and Ren as honorary youth advisor. Palmer helped launch a buddy system pairing kids with and without disabilities for playground activities. And true to her word, Octavia moved out. The day the moving truck left, neighbors threw a block party, not to celebrate her departure, but to honor what came next. 6 months after the fall, Ren and I stood at the exact spot where she had been tripped. But everything had changed. New equipment surrounded us, built for kids of all abilities. Braille signs marked each area. A mural wrapped the fence, a rainbow of children playing together. In the corner, a little fox sat smiling beneath a tree. "Ready to fly, sweetheart?" I asked. She grinned and nodded. "Higher, Daddy. Higher!" As she swung through the air, her laughter echoed across the park. And for the first time in a long time, I felt the weight lift. Justice had come. Not in a courtroom, but in the joyful defiance of a child soaring above where hatred once stood.